In a courtroom where justice was often buried under paperwork, ego, and assumption, silence hung like a thick curtain. That silence shattered, not with a gavel, but with the voice of a child. Your Honor, I would like to make a statement in defense of my grandmother. The room froze. Heads turned. Even the jury, who had been pretending to take notes, looked up, not because of what was said, but because of who said it. He stood barely 4 feet tall, an 8-year-old boy in worn dress shoes, his small hands gripping a folder packed with papers far too adult for his age. His name was Marcus Johnson. Brown skin, wide eyes that had seen too much, and a gaze sharper than any attorney's. There was a tremble in his voice, but not from fear. No, it came from something far more dangerous to this courtroom. Conviction. Judge William Carter blinked, lowering his pen. He had presided over thousands of cases, witnessed hardened criminals, cry billionaires beg, politicians lie, but never this. Never a child walking into his courtroom like he had something grown men failed to carry. Evidence, truth, and the courage to deliver both. The accused sat quietly to his left. Dorothy Johnson, 72 years old, thin-framed, tired eyes. She was his grandmother, his only family, and she was facing criminal charges of embezzling $1,700 from a community housing fund she'd run faithfully for 15 years. To the state, she was another mismanaged administrator. To the prosecutor, David Richardson, she was an easy win, a poor, elderly black woman with no lawyer and no chance. "Young man, you should be in school," the judge said, forcing a smile to make light of the absurdity. But Marcus didn't flinch. "I know, sir," he answered calmly, "but my grandmother has heart problems and can't handle the stress. Her lawyer dropped the case yesterday when he realized he wouldn't get paid." That sentence turned the courtroom into a storm of whispers. The prosecutor, Richardson, a man in his 50s with a sterling conviction record and a designer suit, rolled his eyes. "Your Honor, this is completely irregular. A child cannot represent someone in court," he objected, voice tight, with irritation. But Marcus wasn't asking to represent anyone. He clarified with grace far beyond his years. "I just want to tell the truth. My grandmother taught me that the truth always wins, even when it seems impossible." The words didn't just echo in the room. They hit. They bruised. They reminded everyone present that this wasn't about procedure. It was about justice. The judge hesitated, then leaned forward, studying Marcus. There was something in the boy's tone that couldn't be dismissed. Something unsettling, beautiful, dangerous, clarity. With a quiet sigh, Judge Carter nodded. "Very well, Marcus, you have 5 minutes to speak as a witness." And just like that, the boy opened his folder. Organized documents, handwritten notes, color-coded papers, even drawings to explain points no adult thought needed explaining. The room didn't breathe, because everyone expected a child's desperation. What they got instead was strategy. 5 minutes. That's all he had. And in that time, he'd begin to tear apart the very system that had assumed his grandmother guilty, not with anger, not with shouting, but with something far more terrifying to those who underestimated him: facts. He didn't come to plead. He came to prove, and the real trial was only just beginning. The courtroom had given Marcus 5 minutes. He didn't waste a single second. He took a deep breath, then opened his battered folder. It wasn't just filled with papers. It was a timeline of truth. The jury leaned in. The prosecutor, David Richardson, adjusted his tie with visible irritation. Judge Carter, arms crossed, watched carefully. This was no child fumbling through notes. This was something else entirely. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice steady, "I've lived with my grandmother since my parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. She's been running the Bedford-Stavent housing program since before I was born. Every Sunday night we'd sit at our kitchen table to go over the accounts." He paused, then lifted out a small stack of neatly organized receipts. She let me help her sort them. Blue receipts were expenses, yellow ones were for income. It was our thing, she said. When you can follow the money, you can understand the truth. The jurors were silent now. One or two tilted their heads, curious. The rest simply stared at the colored paper strips, not sure whether to be impressed or embarrassed. "This is what the account looked like before the money went missing," Marcus said, sliding a few photocopies across the bench. Every transaction had a handwritten note in the margins: rent subsidies, plumbing repairs, community cleanup supplies. He flipped to the next set. But then, something changed. On September 12th, $2,500 was taken from the account. It was listed as an emergency repair for the community center's roof. Marcus reached into his folder and pulled out a printed photograph. The image was slightly blurry, clearly taken with an old phone, but clear enough to see the building. This picture was taken the next day on September 13th, by me. Grandma took me there herself. As you can see, no damage, no workers, no signs of any repair. A ripple passed through the courtroom. Murmurs, shifting in seats. Richardson frowned, flipping through his own file as if hoping it suddenly contained something new. Then, Marcus continued, flipping to the next page. On September 18th, another $1,800 went out, supposedly for new security equipment. But I go to the center every week. There was no new equipment. Nothing added, nothing installed. I even asked the custodian. He said no one had touched the place in months. Richardson stood suddenly. "Your Honor, we are wasting valuable court time with stories from a child. He's clearly been coached. None of this qualifies as admissible testimony." Judge Carter didn't blink. "You'll get your turn, Mr. Richardson. Sit down." Marcus continued calmly, almost too calmly for a boy his age. Then, on September 25th, $3,200 was withdrawn. The note said it was for outside legal counsel. But my grandmother never hires outside lawyers. She works with pro bono volunteers, always has. I help her email them sometimes. He pulled out another sheet. An email chain printed from Dorothy's Gmail. Here's confirmation from 3 of her legal volunteers. None of them charged anything. None of them were aware of these funds being used. Now the jury was fully engaged. What had started as disbelief had turned into discomfort, and discomfort was quickly becoming concern. Marcus turned, looked directly at Richardson, and asked the first question that truly shifted the air in the room. "Did you verify if the companies that received these payments actually exist?" Richardson opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He blinked, then finally offered, "The investigation focused on the administrator's responsibility. We followed the paperwork." "So you didn't check the vendors?" Marcus asked again, this time slower. "You didn't check if these companies were real?" The silence was deafening. It wasn't just the kind of silence you get from shock. It was the kind of silence that lingers when people start realizing they've believed the wrong person. "I did," Marcus continued. "With help, of course. I looked up the addresses. One company was a closed-down dry cleaner, the other a mailbox at a UPS store. And the last one? It doesn't exist at all, not in any registry." He didn't yell, he didn't point. He just laid the truth down in a straight, measured tone that made every word heavier. Judge Carter sat back, visibly stunned. This wasn't a momentary display of memory or emotion. This was structured, strategic evidence. From a child. An 8-year-old who understood the principles of fraud, misrepresentation, and negligence better than most professionals. Marcus paused, his voice softening. "I know this sounds strange. A kid talking about fake companies, but I helped my grandma every week. We did this together. I didn't understand the legal terms at first, but I paid attention. I asked questions. She always answered. And when she got accused, I knew something was wrong." A brief flashback flickered in his expression, grief layered under resolve. "She cried for the first time in years, and I realized, if I didn't fight for her, no one else would." Someone in the back of the room sniffled. A juror wiped a tear discreetly. Marcus gently pulled out a final document for this round. "This is a hospital record," he said, "from Brooklyn Methodist. On the day of that first suspicious withdrawal, September 12th, my grandmother was with me, in the emergency room. I had an asthma attack. She stayed with me from 1 p.m. until 5 p.m. He lifted another sheet. "This is the bank log showing when the money was removed. 2:30 p.m., during the time we were both in the ER. That's her alibi. No one checked it. This wasn't just emotional. This was legally damning. The first real, irrefutable evidence that Grandma Dorothy couldn't have authorized the withdrawal. She wasn't even near a phone. She was sitting beside her grandson, holding his hand while he struggled to breathe. Richardson tried to speak again. Your Honor, this document was not presented during discovery. Marcus cut him off, but with more respect than most attorneys ever gave. Dr. Richardson, he said, did you present any evidence proving my grandmother was present when the money was taken? Again, silence. Marcus stepped closer to the bench. Or did you just assume she was guilty because she was the program's administrator? Because she was poor? Because she was old? Because no one expected anyone would fight back? By now, the audience in the courtroom wasn't just watching. They were leaning forward, as if each word from Marcus was exposing something they didn't want to admit. They too had judged Dorothy before hearing the full story. The judge cleared his throat, trying to keep his own voice steady. Mr. Richardson, did your office check the security cameras in the building? Richardson's tone cracked. They weren't working that day. Marcus tilted his head slightly. That's strange, he said, because I called the security company last week. They said the cameras were functioning the entire day. They even offered me the recordings for free, just to help my grandma. Whispers exploded across the room. The damage was done. The cracks were showing. The foundation of the prosecution's case, the assumption of guilt, the lack of thorough investigation, was beginning to crumble. And then Marcus reached for a second folder. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, there's one more thing. I didn't want to lead with this. I wanted to give everyone a chance to see the facts first. He opened the flap, revealing a sealed envelope marked only with a single word. Signatures. The room tensed. And now, Marcus said, his eyes steady, his voice low, I'd like to show you something that might explain who really signed those documents, because it wasn't my grandmother. There are moments in a courtroom when the truth doesn't whisper. It roars. But sometimes it comes quietly, in the voice of an 8-year-old boy, flipping through documents like he was born to do it. Marcus Johnson didn't just walk into the courtroom to defend his grandmother. He came to dismantle everything the prosecution had built, and he did it one page at a time. He gently pulled out the sealed envelope he had just referenced, slid the contents forward, and laid them on the bench with the precision of a trained litigator. These, Marcus said, are the payment authorizations that were supposedly signed by my grandmother. Judge Carter leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Richardson barely looked up, already prepared to dismiss whatever this boy said next. But Marcus wasn't there to argue. He was there to demonstrate. I compared the signatures on these documents to others my grandmother signed before the charges, Marcus continued. I noticed something strange. So I went to the public library. That sentence made Richardson smirk audibly. To the library? He repeated, clearly amused. What did you do, kid? Ask the librarian to solve the case for you? A few people chuckled, but the judge didn't. And Marcus didn't flinch. He had expected this. No, Marcus said coolly. I studied handwriting analysis. The librarian showed me books from law enforcement archives. One was called Introduction to Forensic Document Examination. Another one had a section on signature pressure, baseline drift, and ink angle. I took notes. He laid 2 pages side by side. This is my grandma's signature on a donation receipt from 2 years ago. Notice how smooth the strokes are. Her hand is shaky, but consistent. He pointed to the other paper. Now this one. See how the pen presses down hard? How it dips below the baseline here and here? His small finger traced the inconsistency with astonishing clarity. It's not hers. Richardson threw up his hands. We're now accepting expert analysis from a second grader. Your Honor, this is ridiculous, Marcus replied without even looking at him. Do you have a professional handwriting analysis that proves these signatures are real? The room froze. Judge Carter looked directly at Richardson, who opened his mouth and closed it again. He didn't. I didn't think so, Marcus continued. Because your office never ordered one. You assumed, you never confirmed. The shift in the room was palpable. The jury began whispering again, but this time, not in disbelief at Marcus. They were questioning Richardson. And if my grandmother didn't sign those payment slips, Marcus said softly, then someone else forged them. He let that hang in the air. But this boy wasn't finished. He slid another page forward. This is a list of the vendors that received the payments, supposedly for roofing, security systems, and legal services. I looked them up. None of them have valid business licenses in New York State. 2 of them don't even have real websites. 1 redirects to a dead domain. One's address is a UPS mailbox in Queens. He let that hang too. I printed those records from the Department of Consumer Affairs public portal. Anyone could have checked. But no one did. Richardson's jaw twitched. His carefully curated record of convictions, his 95% win streak, was crumbling before his eyes. And it was happening because a boy had asked the questions he didn't think mattered. And I didn't do all of this alone, Marcus continued. He turned and gestured to the gallery. An older black woman stood in the 3rd row. She had gray hair, thick glasses, and the kind of quiet presence that made you look twice. This is Mrs. Patricia Williams, Marcus said. She's a retired paralegal. She worked at several law firms before she became a librarian. I met her when I came to check out legal books. She offered to help. She taught me how to organize evidence, how to keep emotion out of my argument, how to let the facts speak. Patricia nodded once. She didn't need to speak. She'd already done her work. Her presence was the proof. She told me something, Marcus continued. You're going into a battle where everyone will underestimate you, your age, your skin, your story. That's your power, because they won't see you coming. He paused. They didn't. The jury was fully engaged now. Even the stenographer had slowed down, hanging on every word. Marcus looked at the judge. For the past 2 months, I've been coming home from school and going straight to the library, studying fraud law, studying court procedures. Every day I learned something new. Every day I wrote it down. He lifted a spiral notebook, pages thick with scribbles, annotations, footnotes in a child's handwriting that somehow felt more mature than most lawyers. I wanted to be ready. Then he turned to Richardson and delivered the line that pulled the floor out from under him. Did you even check if these companies were real? It hit like a bullet through glass. The prosecutor's face shifted from irritation to something closer to fear. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. And the silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was damning. Marcus kept going, voice steady, firm, unwavering. The prosecution built their case on assumptions. They didn't investigate the vendors. They didn't confirm the transactions. They didn't check signatures. They didn't verify alibis. They just charged my grandmother because she was easy to blame. A quiet gasp rippled through the courtroom. Every question I asked, every receipt I tracked, every page I printed, it all showed the same thing. Someone wanted this case closed fast. But not solved. Just closed. Then he looked at the judge, at the jury, and finally at his grandmother. I did all this because I had to. Not because I wanted to play lawyer. I just didn't want to lose her. The room, once heavy with legal formality, now felt soaked in something else. Truth, raw, honest, unpolished and painful. And Marcus? He wasn't even out of material yet. He lifted another envelope. I found something else, Your Honor. A bank statement, a call log, and a medical record. Together they prove something that wasn't just missed, it was ignored. The judge blinked. You have more? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir, I'm not done yet. The courtroom couldn't look away. The air in the courtroom had shifted. What began as skepticism toward a child had become a collective reckoning. Whispers had turned to gasps. Glares once directed at Marcus were now burning holes through the prosecution's table. And Richardson, the man who once walked in with the arrogance of a guaranteed conviction, was shrinking by the second. But Marcus wasn't finished. He held up a fresh document. Your Honor, this is a call log from our bank. On the exact day, the first suspicious withdrawal was made, September 12th. Someone called the account hotline at 2:30 p.m. The call lasted 15 minutes. Judge Carter leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Marcus calmly continued. And this, he said, lifting another paper, is a certified medical record from Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. It shows that from 1 DOS to 5 p.m. that same day, my grandmother was in the emergency room with me. I was having an asthma attack. She never left my side. Another low wave of murmurs swelled in the courtroom. Even members of the jury were exchanging looks, some of disbelief, others of outrage. Richardson shot up. Your Honor, this document was not submitted during discovery. We have not had time to verify its authenticity. Marcus turned his gaze toward him, his tone more cutting than any adult cross-examination. Dr. Richardson, did you submit any evidence proving that my grandmother was present when the funds were withdrawn? The silence after that question felt deeper than any objection could break. Richardson opened his mouth, then shut it. Again. You didn't, Marcus said, more to the jury than to the judge now. Because you didn't check. You didn't investigate. You just assumed guilt and filed charges. But you didn't do your job. And just as the judge was about to speak, Marcus raised his hand. There's more. He opened one final envelope, larger, sealed with a strip of red tape. Inside was a USB drive and a typed transcript. He looked straight at Judge Carter. Your Honor, what you're about to hear is a legally obtained recording. I checked New York's recording laws. This call took place on a publicly posted office line, where calls are recorded for transparency. He plugged the USB into a speaker, system provided by the clerk. The sound crackled, and then came the voice. Undeniable. Tony, I need you to push this case against the old woman in Bedford, Richardson's voice said, clear as day. It doesn't matter if she's guilty. I need this win before the Attorney General's election. The courtroom stopped breathing. Another voice, nervous, responded, Are you sure, Rick? What if someone checks deeper? The investigation's kind of shallow. Richardson's voice again, this time colder. She's just some old black woman with no lawyer. The jury's already decided before they walk in the door. Just get it. Closed. The sound cut. Then came a different reaction. Gasps, expletives muffled behind hands, the shuffle of jurors leaning forward in disbelief. Richardson had gone pale. That recording is time-stamped September 15th, Marcus said, 3 days after the first missing funds. Richardson jumped to his feet. Your Honor, that recording is inadmissible. It's entrapment. Manipulation. Judge Carter raised a hand. Mr. Richardson, sit down. But Marcus wasn't done. He lifted another printed sheet, this time a screenshot of a text conversation. He read it aloud. Make sure no one digs into the vendors. Focus only on the admin's signature. Case needs to be over in 2 weeks. Max. The sender? Richardson. The recipient? An assistant in his office. If this is not suppression of evidence, I don't know what is, Marcus said. And then came the final blow. The page he had saved for last. This is Dr. Richardson's personal bank statement. On October 2nd, 3 days after charges were filed, he received a deposit of $25,000 from a company called Elmstead Strategies. He held up another printout. That same company is listed as the roof repair vendor on the September 12th withdrawal. You could have heard a pin drop. Richardson froze. His lips moved, but no words came out. The sweat on his forehead had begun to bead into a slow stream down his temple. My grandmother didn't just get accused, Marcus said quietly. She got targeted, framed, by the same man who's supposed to protect the public. From the gallery? Dorothy sat quietly. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her grandson had already said everything she ever wanted the world to hear. Judge Carter removed his glasses, massaging the bridge of his nose. His voice, when it came, was hoarse. In all my years on this bench, I have never witnessed anything like this. He turned to Richardson. In addition to the immediate dismissal of all charges against Dorothy Johnson, I am referring this case to the State Attorney General's Office for investigation of prosecutorial misconduct, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Mr. Richardson, you are hereby relieved of your duties, effective immediately. A security officer approached Richardson, who stumbled backward, face ashen. This isn't, he stammered. That kid, he hacked me. This is a setup. But no one listened. Not the judge, not the jury, and not the people, now watching him from the gallery with the same eyes he had once used to judge them. As the guards placed their hands on his arms and began to escort him out, Marcus stood silent. And just before Richardson crossed the threshold of the courtroom, Marcus spoke again. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried more power than any courtroom statement in recent memory. My grandmother taught me that knowledge is power, but love is courage. And that's what beat you. Richardson froze for a split second before being led out of the room, a broken man. The entire room erupted, not into chaos but into applause. Spontaneous, loud, emotional applause. Even the court reporter wiped away a tear. Jurors stood, clapping. The bailiff nodded solemnly toward Marcus. Judge. Carter didn't stop the crowd. For once, a courtroom didn't need order. It needed release. Dorothy slowly stood, walked to her grandson, and placed a hand on his shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her eyes said it all. And Marcus? He simply turned to the room and looked at every single person who had doubted him, underestimated him, dismissed him. Because what he said next, what he was about to say, would echo far beyond this courtroom. 6 months later, the boy who had once stood trembling in a courtroom now stood tall in front of a packed auditorium, not as a student, as a speaker. Marcus Johnson, now 9 years old, stood at the podium of Brooklyn Law School, facing 300 future attorneys who had studied his case like scripture. They called it the Johnson precedent. But to Marcus, it was just what needed to be done. He wore a pressed blue shirt and sneakers that lit up slightly when he walked. He hadn't changed much, not on the outside. But his words carried the quiet weight of someone who had already faced injustice, stared it down, and forced it to blink first. Justice, he told the room, doesn't mean punishing someone. It means protecting the ones who can't protect themselves. And sometimes, the only person standing between the truth and a mistake is you. In the front row, Dorothy sat beaming. Her eyes were softer now. The dark circles from sleepless nights had faded. Her heart condition had stabilized. For the first time in years, she was surrounded not by suspicion, but by celebration. Since the trial, the Bedford-Stavent housing program had received record donations. The mayor declared it a model for community-driven programs. Dorothy was asked to join the city's Housing Oversight Council, bringing transparency where there had once been silence. But the biggest impact came from Marcus's next move. With help from Mrs. Patricia and a coalition of educators and retired legal professionals, they launched the Marcus Project, a grassroots initiative to teach basic legal rights and civic literacy to underserved youth. It started with 1 school, then 5. Now, just 6 months later, it had reached 25 Brooklyn public schools. Hundreds of kids, many of whom had never seen a courtroom or opened a law book, now knew their rights, their voice, and their power. People think kids don't understand the law, Marcus said during a classroom session. But that's because they never bothered to explain it to us. The state noticed. Inspired by the trial, New York passed the Marcus Law, a bill requiring prosecutors to submit verifiable evidence of a defendant's physical presence at the time of a financial crime before charges could be filed. Other states began drafting similar legislation. Legal blogs called it the most significant child-led legal reform in modern American history. And as for David Richardson, convicted of prosecutorial misconduct, fraud, and corruption, he lost his law license. He served 2 years in prison and, upon release, disappeared into a quiet town working as an insurance salesman. His name became a cautionary tale. But Marcus never spoke ill of him. When asked during a podcast interview if he hated Richardson, Marcus replied, "I don't hate him. I feel sorry for him. He had power, but he used it to hurt. I had none, but I used it to protect. It wasn't about revenge, it never had been. It was about love and justice, and a boy with nothing but a binder full of truth and a heart full of purpose." As the law school crowd stood in ovation, the dean walked to the mic. "Marcus taught us something fundamental," he said. "That knowledge without character is dangerous. But character with knowledge, that can change the world." And that's exactly what Marcus had done. Before leaving the stage, Marcus looked at the crowd, then at the camera streaming live online. "If an 8-year-old with a folder can change the law," he said, "what could you do with your voice?" He smiled softly, adjusted his binder, and began to walk off stage. But just before the feed cut, he turned back with a glimmer in his eyes. "This was just the beginning," he said. "The next story is even more unbelievable. Subscribe. Stay tuned. The revolution isn't over."